All right, I am going to call this meeting to order. Town Board of Estes Park, what is it, February 25th, 2025, now in session. If anybody would like to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please do so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's move forth to the agenda approval. Are there any changes, trustees, any changes or additions to the agenda as written?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Any other comments? No? Let's go ahead and vote for that. Agenda approved unanimously as written. We'll move on to public comment for items not on the agenda. We ask that any public comments on quasi-judicial items be reserved for the appropriate public hearing. Does any member of the public request to speak on a non-agenda item? If you do, we'll ask for your name, address. You'll have a limit of 3 minutes, and it's not intended to be a discussion session. Seeing none, we'll move forward. Town board comments and liaison reports, and Trustee Igo.
Thanks, Mayor. I have no report.
Thank you. Trustee Lancaster.
Yes, I attended the Planning Commission meeting last week as the liaison, and I did breach the subject about having a joint meeting. They were excited about that too, and I think, from what I hear, it's in the works. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sinek.
I'm going to second Trustee Eigel's comments.
As is typical, I will continue to provide most of my activities, or the ones worthy of public publication, to the town clerk where they can publish them. And just for your information, those end up in the packet, not the actual minutes of the board meeting. And the packet lives forever and ever, amen. And so you can see what I'm up to. I will mention one, though. I was able to attend the 105-year anniversary of the League of Women Voters of Colorado down in Denver at the Unsinkable Molly Brown Museum down there behind the Capitol. It was a wonderful event. There were several speakers there, including the president of the Rocky Mountain chapter of the NAACP. It was very inspirational. It still amazes me how long it took in this country before the women had the right to vote, and how much longer it took before everybody had the right to vote, all of the citizens of the United States. And that's something we do not want to see erode. At the same time, I was being inspired by listening to the history. I also have concerns and want to make sure that we protect that right. There's no right more important. Yeah, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and voting, how important that is. So that's the only comment. The rest will be in the packet when they publish it. Trustee Youngland.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
We're setting a record. Okay, Trustee Hazelton.
I do have things to talk about tonight, but only two. I am the liaison as well as a sitting board member for Visit Estes Park. We had a special session since our last board meeting where most of it was spent in executive session. And ultimately, the board came out of that session and voted to postpone the CEO search process for up to 90 days, which is part of the contract with Searchwide Global, the firm that's completing that search process. So there's no, additional expense incurred for pausing it. And the reason is to complete an independent investigation into an issue that arose during the finalist portion. And that's a statement that Chair Jurgens had shared, so some folks may be familiar with that. I don't have any additional information after that meeting, but we do have a board meeting on Thursday, and I hope to have some of my questions answered because I've got a few. I'll also be asking the staff at that time to consider how Visit Estes Park marketing plans might need to be nimble in light of what's happening at the federal administration level, and how we might need to adjust the messaging that we're sending out based on how park experience might look, or Forest Service experience might look, kind of that natural land engagement. So I'm looking forward to presenting those questions to staff and seeing if they can work on that and get us some information. And then my second item is for restorative justice. They had a board meeting last week, but the thing that I want to talk about the most is that they hosted a deliberative engagement workshop Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of last week. Mayor Hall and I were able to attend the introduction to it on Thursday morning, along with some members of the town staff. And it was awesome. It was a really, really fascinating conversation about how to facilitate productive conversations for, quote, wicked problems, or problems that don't have a straightforward solution. And things like land use and rezoning requests and things like that are often considered wicked problems because there's not a very clear black and white answer. So I was only able to attend that introduction portion, but it was just really wonderful. And Dr. Martine Carcassonne, who presented it, provided a lot of great resources for our community and has for a number of years. He's done this workshop before for our community to use as we embark on some of these wicked problems, like the rewrite of the development code here over the next several months. So I'm looking forward to hearing from those who attended all 3 days, who are now trained facilitators for our community, and how they're going to be able to engage and support some of the things that we do at the town level. But I just want to give my congratulations and kind of applause, mini applause for RJ on and the library, who was a partner on that, on hosting that workshop. It was really great for our community. And that's all that I have.
I second what you said about that. Great session. They, in 2 hours, were able to cover the content of the course, though then the workshop got much more deeply into it with practice and everything. Great stuff, and we need to continue because, yes, we do have wicked problems, even though that's an odd word. We do have tough ones. Trustee Brown.
So I have a few things. I attended the Planning Commission meeting as well, even though I'm not liaison. I thought I ought to attend one, get a flavor for that before we have our joint meeting. It was very interesting, and it was good to attend. Also, we had a trustee talk, Trustee Heigl and I did recently. That was a very good thing. It was deferred from an earlier time, I guess when the town hall was closed. But we held it. The mayor and I tomorrow are going to be touring the Boulder Recycling Center, which I think will be an interesting thing to get a sense of what they're doing down there and how that might apply to us. And then the only other thing is I am liaison to the EDWC, which it's hard to get used to EDWC, but it's the Economic Development Workforce Council. And they had a meeting last Friday, and they have 3 working groups that are ongoing. One is called Sprint, which is kind of a 2-hour mini seminar. They have BASE, which goes through the entire year. In fact, I am in the BASE class this year, get a sense of what that's about. It's, again, business training. And then there's a section on hospitality as well that meets regularly. And then they've been working on their annual plan and are in the final stages of finalizing that. There are a number of workshops coming up that are worthy of discussion here. There's a collaborative program with the Small Business Development Center, and Lori Wiles is doing a workshop. Had the first one in January, and the next one is, I think there were 22 attendees, so pretty well attended. There's going to be another one. I guess I don't know when the other one is, but it's coming up. Oh, it's March 24th. In addition, there's Colorado Green Business Network is meeting. Women of Impact is getting together to make their awards. There's going to be a human resources workshop. So there's a lot of things going on that is coordinated by the EDWC. And so it's active and engaging with the community. And that is all I have.
Thank you. 7:11. Good timing for our prefacing items. Town Administrator Mahalik, you have the floor for your report.
Thank you, Mayor. Only one item tonight. I would like to introduce our new Finance Director, Tammy Zimmerman. Tammy joins us from Farmers Branch, Texas, and I told her she would be available to say a few words, but not a speech, so.
Good. Yeah, you told me
Welcome.
this a minute before, so. Good evening. I'm very honored to be appointed to this position of Finance Director, and I look forward to working with the mayor and the trustees and the rest of the town of Estes Park. I take the position very seriously in maintaining financial transparency and integrity, and I look forward to working with each of you.
Thank you.
We're very happy to have Tammy on board, and she is on your consent agenda tonight as the appointment of Town Treasurer and Town Clerk Pro Tem.
And I will try to not use you all as much going forward, but it will slip in and out of some of my presentations.
It's grammatically correct. I love it. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. We like variety.
Good, good.
that's all I have tonight, Mayor.
Thank you.
Righto. Thank you very much. Welcome. The consent agenda, I'll read the items in detail. Item 1, the bills, and the link in the posted packet and agenda. You can take a look at the detail if necessary. Item 2, town board meeting and study session minutes dated February 11th, 2025. Item 3, Estes Park Planning Commission minutes dated January 21st, 2025, acknowledgement only. Item 4, Resolution 1325, intergovernmental agreement with the Colorado Department of Transportation for fiscal year 2025, Federal Transit Administration 5311 baseline rural area formula grant funds to support Estes Transit, the peak, as we know it, PO 491003850. Item 5, Resolution 1425, contract with E&M Concrete LLC for 2025 concrete repairs, $107,961 budgeted. And finally, item 6, appointment of Town Treasurer, Town Clerk Pro Tem Tammy Zimmerman. Those are the items on the consent agenda. Does any member of the public, including the trustees, request to have an item removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I don't have a question. I have a motion to make that we approve the consent agenda as it's presented before us.
I'll second.
Any other comments? We'll vote on that motion. Consent agenda passes, and I made a pledge to myself I would remember to say it was moved by Trustee Eigel, it was seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Sinek. Before the last comment opportunity, it's a little bit of rules of orders that I would like to get because it's good and handy to have in the recording. And so I'll do that henceforth. Okay, consent agenda approved. We have one report and discussion item, and this will be about the Estes Nonprofit Network update and check-in. We have Executive Director Kraft, who gets around quite a bit these days and hobnobs with the governor all around the state, I think. And so very, very good stuff. Yeah.
Cato, can you hit the microphone there?
There you go.
And have had so much caffeine that if I just start like combusting up here, that's why. I do have the economic impact report, so I'm just going to hand them out to everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for allowing this time for me to come and give some updates about what's happening at the Estes Nonprofit Network and across our nonprofit industry here in Estes Park. As I said in my email the other day, this is a extension of the request to meet with you all towards the end of 2024 to make sure that you all understand what the Estes Nonprofit Network does and also what's happening across nonprofits here. So since we last spoke, which was around budget time, we have had 94% engagement with our local nonprofit industry. We have completed the first of its kind nonprofit economic survey. Today, we actually launched a new interactive website, so that's very exciting. You can go on there and do keyword searches to figure out nonprofit services. We're using that to be able to map our nonprofit services as well and see if there's any duplication, but really where those gaps exist. It's very pretty, it's very bright, it's very fun. And I have been selected as a 2025 Colorado Governor's Fellow. So I actually leave tomorrow to go to Colorado Springs for session 2 with the governor. Thank you. We also had our second yearly disbursement of the Giving Guest program. Since the program's inception in 2022, we have distributed over $32,000 to local nonprofits in completely free and unrestricted dollars to them. That program is it's really at the intersection of business, philanthropy, and tourism. We're able to connect local businesses who want to ask their customers to either round up at the counter or they white label a product to be able to donate back to nonprofits. Again, first of its kind for this community. And our education was a really big push last year. We provided about $465,000 worth of educational value to nonprofits completely free in this community. And that number comes from what our presenters would usually charge to present to groups times the amount of attendees that we have had. And we had over 161 participants and offered 713 hours of professional development. Our 2025 focuses, we're in the second year of our 3-year strategic plan that started in 2024. We want to continue with our education workshops. Last year we hosted 8. We hope to get up to 10 this year. And we'd like to implement what we're calling Sips of Knowledge, just a casual 1-hour coffee session about actionable workshops for our nonprofits. Anything from how do I use Canva to create presentations to what is social media and how do I benefit from it. We also want to start facilitating targeted work groups to address community challenges, both in line with the Town of Estes Park strategic plan and also just some statewide, federal-wide, but community-wide issues. And as I mentioned before, to map the nonprofit services so that way I can come to you all and say, hey, we have these nonprofits doing this work. There is a gap in this subject area. And when nonprofits come to me and say, I want to start a nonprofit, I can look to this sheet that has hard data and say, okay, well, this is not happening in this community. That's probably a great thing to start. Or maybe let's merge with another organization that's already doing it. We really want to align policy advocacy and action, especially in light of everything that's gone on in the last 4 weeks at the federal level in terms of federal funding freezes. And we also want to become the champion for trust-based philanthropy to promote equitable funding practices here in the Estes Valley. Trust-based philanthropy is really rooted in relationships with funders. So it's where if I came up to you and I said, I'm going to give you $100 and we have a relationship and I know that you know what's best to give that $100 to, that's all it is. There's no arduous grant reporting. There's grant reporting, but not the, can you track everyone's eye color and this and that and that. That takes hours and hours and hours to be able to do. This is a big push across nonprofits nationwide, but for our region, we would like to be the champion for that to help not only encourage large funders throughout the state, but specifically private foundations. Private foundations in Colorado as of 2024 have $15.2 billion under asset. And they distributed $421 million last year to nonprofits. So there is a big opportunity there to help advocate and to essentially have Estes be the test kitchen for trust-based philanthropy. Dump a bunch of money into Estes nonprofits and see what's going to happen. And as mentioned in our base funding report last year, we are really looking to eliminate our reliance on competitive local funding by 2026. There's only so many competitive grants here in the Estes Valley. It's very hard for us to be in the running for those while we support all of our nonprofits, but we also need to have grant money to function. So we're really looking at strengthening our mission partner model, which is our individual donors and business donors, to really have the baseline of our finances come from donors and investments. Trustee Lancaster had asked about the federal funding freeze and kind of what happened and what's affecting our nonprofits here. So just a quick overview. On January 27th at about 8 p.m. Eastern time, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, which is the budgetary office for the President's office, issued a memo. It was very vague, and it basically said that all federal grant funds, disbursements, prior year requests and future requests are frozen as of 5 p.m. on the 28th Eastern time. So in Colorado, we all woke up to this, and it was truly a 5-alarm fire. I was on the phone all day. I was on conferences with the National Council of Nonprofits, with the Colorado Nonprofit Association, about what does this mean? What is this vague memo that states executive orders, but not individuals, but yes, individuals and nonprofits that serve those individuals. So it was hectic. Legal blocks began that afternoon or that morning of the 28th. The ban was supposed to take effect at 5 p.m. The National Council of Nonprofits, along with about 4 other organizations in Washington, D.C., got a federal judge to put a restraining order injunction on the memo at 4:58 p.m. Eastern time. So that pushed the stay until the Monday of the next week. Between the 28th at 4:58 and end of day on the 29th, the OMB had actually rescinded that memo, which to us was like, okay, everything's open. But then the White House's press secretary came out and said that the memo still stands, and the intention of the memo still stands. It will still happen. We're just looking at alternative routes at this point. So again, 5-alarm fire, everyone's freaking out. During this time, in my role, I was able to be on all of these large town halls and these conferences with our national council, with our state council, with the Attorney General's office to figure out what does this mean, not only for us, but for Estes Valley nonprofits. In that time, from the call ending at noon till 4 p.m., we created and pushed out the Strong Nonprofits Toolkit. That is a living document with actionable items for our nonprofits to go into and plan what are short-term strategies, what are medium-term strategies, what are long-term strategies in order to start to work to shift your funding models if they are affected by federal cuts and crimps. As of today, this has been downloaded over 200 times. We have had statewide organizations reach out to us to help push it across the state. And we were one of the first within the state to actually issue a statement and some type of actionable item. So as of today, the memo is fully rescinded, but uncertainty remains. There is still delays and blockages in federal grant funding, whether that's from new grants that are coming out or are supposed to be coming out, from reimbursements. A lot of the time, the federal grants, they reimburse on a quarter plus. So many of our nonprofits who receive federal funding here are now have put in their reimbursement for quarter 4 in early months of quarter 1. And that money is either in process, has been received, or has not been received. And we are seeing have not been received more often than not. They are also usually on that 1-to-1 reimbursement or that 2-to-1. So that money's already been spent for those programs. They're waiting to get that grant receipt in. More so, I think, than the federal dollars being delayed is we're seeing a lot of nonprofits worry about how they can still accomplish their mission and not violate any language or intentions that are in executive orders, and they worry about retribution. That was a big call. That was a big topic on a recent call. Was, you know, the IRS, which is the holder of our 501c3 tax exempt status, is a federal agency. Federal agencies must follow what executive orders are coming out. And if a nonprofit's mission is directly not aligning with executive orders that are currently coming out, can they still work to accomplish their mission without being worried about their C3 status being pulled? I have not heard of anyone's C3 status being pulled as of today, but things are literally changing every single day. There's a notion that the nonprofits nationwide are talking about. It's called the head on a swivel mode, because we're constantly just what's going to happen. Locally, we know about $4 million of federal funds come directly to nonprofits, but even more so, they come through trickle down through the statewide agencies. And that's where we're seeing these crimps of if the federal funds didn't pay out the Arts Council for the state, then the Arts Council can't release their grant to then fund local nonprofits. Any questions on that? There is a question area towards the end, but.
So that's an addition to the 4 million?
That's in addition to the 4
directly?
million, yeah. So this $4 million is only direct funds dispersed from the federal government to local nonprofits.
But not the trickle down?
Not the trickle down.
okay.
And I mean, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can pull it from our economic data, but I would say it's at least double that amount. Okay, I'm gonna quickly take a sip of water. And I would love to take you all through our economic impact study. That is a 24-page document you have in front of you. I'm not going to take you through all 24 pages. Don't you worry. We're not going to be here till 11. If anyone in the audience or watching would like to follow along and see what this document looks like, you can go to that link on this slide. It's epnonprofit.org/economic-impact. We had our first presentation of this study this morning. So this is fresh off the printers. We love good hometown businesses that call them on a Monday morning and say, can you please rush and print this? So thank you to Hobart Office Services. This Estes Valley Nonprofit Industry Economic Impact Study was in partnership between the Estes Nonprofit Network and in part funded by the Work-Based Learning Incentive Program, which is a program of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment that was administered through the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce. So we were actually able to have that cross-geographic reach with them to put on this project. The analysis of this project was done by Lucy Scott, who is an Estes Park Bobcat. She is now in her senior year at CSU in a economics major. She does not know what she wants to do with it yet, but she's very excited to learn what's out there. This is the first of its kind in a geo-targeted study in terms of on a small scale. The Colorado Nonprofit Association, in collaboration with Philanthropy Colorado, had done an economic showcase about what's happening across nonprofits in Colorado, but it really focused on the large, like 5 different regions throughout the state. So we are diving into what's happening in Estes Park. And this study establishes a baseline for understanding the collective impact of our local nonprofit sector. So when we talk about how many nonprofits we have in the Estes Valley, we often hear the number 114, and we do. That number is growing, but as of the last IRS check, we have 114 organizations. Out of those 114, 70 of them are 501c3s that have active programming, are located in and in service to the Estes Valley. So that other 40 plus Those are C4s, C6s, C8s, social clubs, nonprofits that are in Estes but serve outside of the community, and nonprofits that have services in Estes but they aren't active at this time. So this study is baselined off of 70 organizations. We sent out a survey in the summer of 2024. We had 56 nonprofits self-report. We were able to pull 7 organizations information from 990s, which is our public tax form, and then 7 of them did not self-report, and we couldn't pull their 990 because they filed a postcard, which means they operate at less than 200,000, usually less than 50,000. And the postcard, there's very minimal information on it. So the Estes Valley nonprofit industry is a notable contributor to the region. This is what the CNA based one of their economic studies on, which is the Northeast region. That's 7 counties. And out of this Northeast region, there's 2,600 nonprofits. Estes Valley accounts for 1.6% of the population of this Northeast region, yet we hold 3.8% of the nonprofit jobs. And even more so, we spend 7.2% at our nonprofits. So what that tells me is that our nonprofits are active in turning over their income into services in our community. Nonprofits are not just economic drivers, not just charities, they're economic drivers. Scratch that from the record. This is the big wow moment. We were able to calculate a rough estimation that the Estes Park GDP is $1.1 billion. Our local nonprofits account for 10.3% of that local GDP. That is about $114 million. Visitor spending is the largest account in that at $504 million, resident income $433 million, business income at $241 million, government spending at $88.5, and nonprofits at $114 million. And this is annually. The makeup of our nonprofits are small, which is in line with what is statewide, but we specifically scale towards the smaller end. 82% of our nonprofits have a budget of less than $500,000, whereas about 60% operate at less than $200,000. The median budget for our local nonprofits is $132,000. So they are small, but they are mighty. There is a discrepancy, not a discrepancy, but a gap, I should say, between the $5 million to $15 million, and then there's a big gap, and then it's $45 million. We have one nonprofit there. So I believe it's on page 14 of your report. There's a chart that pulls out the top 1% to help unskew the data of what nonprofits actually look like here in the Estes Valley. One of the questions that we often get is, well, why are we including a nonprofit that is just so far off the charts in terms of income? Because that's going to skew that data, but they still are a nonprofit. It's just like the $500 per year nonprofit that, sells flowers. They are still a nonprofit just as much as this large one. I don't know how to go back, but with that budget breakdown, this also tells us that funding challenges hit small nonprofits the hardest because they often lack reserves or have that large donor base to be able to fall back on. So when I first started, I was looking at our old website at the time and went to our nonprofit list. And when I got to the E's, my eyes started to glaze over because everything is Estes Park, Estes Valley. So, so we really wanted to make a way to shape the nonprofit industry and have sectors within that industry. So we have 6 different sectors that our nonprofits can choose from. You can see that list there. The names that are under each sector, that's just some examples of the nonprofits who identify in each of those. Our nonprofits self-identify, but our largest sector is the community and education sector, and our smallest is health and wellness. And the chart on your left will be able to show you kind of where those fall. The revenue by sector, so nonprofits bring in, and this is hard dollars, $103 million per year to this economy. Youth and families, again, that is the sector where that $45 million nonprofit lives. So that is very big. But they bring in the most at 57.1%. Arts and culture brings in the least at 1.1%. Arts and culture and emergency and human services, I just want to point out, those two sectors do not have nonprofits that fall in that 5 million plus category. All of the other sectors do. So with this $103 million of revenue, 31 million of that is generated from outside of the Estes Valley. So that's $31 million that would not come into this community without our nonprofits. Tourism is at 17.3. We know that $504 million from the Visit Estes Park Tourism Intercept Survey from 2022, I believe, stated that visitors spend $504 million in this community. If you take 17.3% to that 504, tourism is contributing 3.4% to local nonprofits. We see that as a growth area. That is a very easy opportunity for us to help grow programming, to help catch more of those dollars, to help offset nonprofit costs. Again, I just spoke about this, but you'll see in our action items at the end, one of our goals is to increase the Giving Guest program, which again is at that intersection of business, philanthropy, and tourism to help access unrestricted dollars for nonprofits. The expenses are at 97.3 million. Again, consider that the youth and family sector that has that large nonprofit in it. But it's about a $5.5 million difference between income in and expenses out. And what that shows me is that our nonprofits are turning their income into services very quickly. Very few are holding money for the rainy day. This percentage, or this difference of 5.5 million is very rare for the statewide. I believe statewide income was about 20% higher than expenses. Okay, this is a slide that gets me most excited. Public investments in our nonprofits are relatively small in terms of the value that they're bringing. So we got this $114 million number, which is the value of goods and services. So this includes the $103 million of hard income, volunteer hours, and in-kind contributions gives us that 114. If our nonprofits were to go away and the town or the government were to take over the services of that nonprofits currently offer, we would need to increase that service cost by at the minimum 35%. So that would cost our taxpayers $131 million annually. These are annual numbers. If it were to go to a for-profit, we would need to increase that number by 50% at the minimum, and that is for a 10% profit margin for that business, to $146 million annually. So our nonprofits are not only a powerhouse of value and that they're doing good in the community, but they are a bargain value. They are saving taxpayers, saving community members money by holding the work that they do. Public investment, the town of Estes Park contributes about 500, so at the time of this was based off the first year of 6E funding. Not the housing authority pass through, but the child care funding. So $567,000 annually, about $362,000 between base funding and community initiative funding. And then in the first 6 months of 6E, there was $205,000 dispersed to local nonprofits. That number is obviously growing as we see that change in the from 88 to 12 to 80 to 20. But that's your number right there. In-kind contributions, again, 8.2 million in volunteer contributions. The population of Estes Park on a good day is roughly around 6,000. I think we can all agree to that. We have reported almost 4,000 volunteers, individuals, volunteering in this community. From that, 225,000 hours volunteered. Colorado values a volunteer hour at $36.36 per hour. So that means volunteers have given back $8.2 million to this community. I believe that this number is a very small sample size. We had some nonprofits not answer this question. We had some nonprofits, when they answered it, I was like, well, that's not right. Like, I know for a fact that you give way more than 10 hours a week. So I am, and I don't have the data, so I won't put it on there, but I firmly believe that that number is doubled, if not tripled. And that only includes nonprofits. That doesn't include government agencies who rely on volunteers, like the fire department, the park, the school. 60% of our nonprofits operate without paid staff here in the Estes Valley. So we pay out annually $47.3 million in salaries. That's only for the 40% that operate with paid staff. 636 employees across the industry here, and 76% of those live locally here in Estes. What that tells me is that our nonprofits are invested in this community and their workers are invested in this community.
Kato, sorry to interrupt, but is that number, the salary number, is that just like straight financial compensation, or does it include like benefits, and or is it the full package?
That's the full package.
Okay.
Yes, that's the full benefit package. According to the Housing Authority study that was done, I think last year, about a third of for-profit businesses have employees that are from outside, that have to commute in. So we are at about a quarter, just under a quarter of nonprofit employees are commuting in. The demand is rising for our services, or for nonprofit services. 55% of nonprofits have seen a higher demand within the last year, and 43% struggle to meet that demand. In one of the pages in your booklet, there's actually a breakdown. This was the only question we asked that people could type in their own answer and give like person-to-person feedback. So we aggregated their responses per sector broken down in that report. But across the industry, we're seeing rising costs being an issue, funding competition, workforce shortages, and a lack of tourism-driven funding. But we have the power to make changes. The Estes Nonprofit Network doesn't believe that we do a report, it gets put on the shelf, and then it collects dust and we're done. We are using this report to help us know what our nonprofits need, where they need us to be, and how we can step in to support the entire nonprofit industry. As I mentioned before, one of the first things that we are growing is our Giving Guest program. We have an active partnership right now with Visit Estes Park to help provide marketing support, to create videos about it, to show tourism that you can stay, play, and give while you're here. We're also growing that to not only have businesses, but also lodges that might be willing to add on $1 per night to their stays. So that way people who stay at a lodge, a B&B, whatever, if they have a 5-night stay, they would then donate $5 back based on this optional fee. So we are growing that program as we speak right now. Again, trust-based philanthropy, my outreach director, Karen McPherson, put out an article about 2 years ago called The Nonprofit Overhead Paradox. What this talks about is it's very easy for funders to want to restrict dollars to programs, but overhead is just as important as programs, because without the people, you cannot run the program. So this article really dives deep into what does it mean when you give $1 and restrict it. This goes hand in hand with us advocating for trust-based philanthropy. And we also want to do what we're doing right now. We want to push out this study. I am available to meet with anyone who would like to deep dive into that 24 pages. I have so many spreadsheets. It's a little bit alarming with all of these numbers, but I would also really like to help other small rural communities that rely on their nonprofits replicate this study. So that way they can be just as informed as the public to the value of nonprofits, but that way the nonprofits are informed of how they show up in their communities. They are not just having their hand out saying, can I have some more? They are doing good. They are economic drivers. And without nonprofits, small communities, their cracks would become canyons. The end. Any questions? Mayor Hall?
I was going to ask the other trustees. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
I read your stuff and read through most of it already in the time that you had provided that. And so hearing it a couple times really helps. And
Yeah.
I do understand the power of amplification and education that you're able to bring in a relatively unique way with this organization.
Yeah.
So, good stuff. Thanks
you.
for the good work. Other comments or questions?
Hopefully a quick question, and you mentioned the need to kind of drill down locally beyond just the region so that we could kind of get some specifics, which I totally appreciate. And I think I know some of the answer to this, but could you talk about why the nonprofit network is still so hard to not say EPNRC, but the nonprofit, the network is the organization to do this work, and why you chose now? Because it's obviously really relevant with some of the other things you talked about as part of your presentation, but just in particular, like what was the impetus?
Yeah, really it was a large push upon my hiring at EPNRC. This was something that I have been passionate about wanting to accomplish since I moved to this community 7 years ago. It is very, very, very rare to have an organization like the Nonprofit Network in a community doing the work that we are doing. 99% of communities do not have an organization like us. So it is very special that we are here. We know that the Estes Valley has one of the highest concentrations per capita of nonprofits throughout the state. And I have always gotten on this soapbox, and if you spend any time with me, you've known that I get on this soapbox, that our nonprofits are not just doing good, they are a part of driving the economy and need to be seen as such. And they are businesses just as much as they are doing good. So to finally be able to have funding to do this project, a question was asked in the session this morning of how much would it cost to do this project from hiring a consultant. When I was reaching out to consultants in Denver just to help build a framework, at the minimum it was $45,000. So we lucked out, I'll tell you that. But to be able to sit in our unique position, know that a lot of communities don't have the ability or the capacity to do this, but we do, and we can test kitchen it, we can make it happen for our community and make Estes Park rise it up to across the state and with the Colorado Nonprofit Association of, wow, what's happening in Estes up there? Because now the nonprofits are being quantified, not just in service value, but in actual dollars. So that was really the push behind it. And that's one of my passions, is to be able to help other small communities and to hand them over the methods that we used, so that way they can replicate it. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to Lucy Scott. She was pretty key, wasn't she?
Lucy, I'm forever indebted to Lucy. She is wonderful. She will be back up here this summer as well, and would love to learn more about nonprofits and join any boards. And if any town trustees are interested in picking her brain about economy and nonprofits, she now has about 9 months worth of knowledge of deep diving in. In that, in the report as well, you'll see all of the statistics Lucy used to calculate these numbers. There's a regression chart as well that shows when you give $1 to a nonprofit, that multiplies to $2.75. The biggest investment is actual investment dollars, which is planned giving. It's another soapbox, but I'll save that. So yeah, very much thank you to Lucy.
Yeah, you say multiply, I said amplification is how I think
synonymous.
of it. But thanks much.
Yeah,
very good
absolutely.
information. As always, thanks for all the good work.
Yeah, thank you all.
We're going to move forward onto our action items. Our first action item is Resolution 1525, reaffirming support for immigration reform. Town Administrator Mahalik will lead us into the topic. I'll preface it by reminding folks that this thing that we're looking at predominantly was from 2018. It was a resolution approved by the board at that time, correct? I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I will be brief tonight. At the January 28th study session, the board expressed interest in considering and discussing whether or not to reaffirm the position taken in Resolution 1018 back in 2018 relative to supporting immigration reform. What you have in front of you tonight, proposed resolution 1525, reaffirms that resolution. There's some very minor updates to make sure that it is pertinent to what's happening now versus what was going on in 2018. But in essence is a restatement and reaffirmation of the support that was contained in resolution 1018. Happy to answer any questions if you have them. That's all I have.
Questions or comments from the trustees? And I'll try to do a better job of recognizing you, which I have failed utterly on thus far in the board meeting. Trustee Brown.
So I support this resolution in large measure because it is a resolution, I think, that people from all sides of the aisle can agree on, that our immigration system is broken and we need immigration reform to really make it work properly. And I don't think you need to be a Democrat or a Republican to feel that way. It's I think really the majority of people would say that. The other thing is that it does definitely relates to a local issue insofar as we have quite a large immigrant community for this size community. And so it's definitely relevant, and particularly with our tourism-based economy, where many of those immigrants are serving our tourists and our lodges and our restaurants. So I like this resolution largely because it felt very nonpartisan to me, and that it really supports what I think we generally agree on, and not, it's not trying to divide us into segments of the community that feel one way or the other on it. It certainly doesn't solve anything, and I'm not optimistic that the Congress will take this up, but nonetheless, I think it's appropriate for us to support this.
Thank you. Trustee Eigel.
Thanks. I would be behind this. I should preface by saying that through our conversations and through several conversations with folks I see in the audience and in the community, my thoughts on this have evolved a little bit. I would support this if the resolution looks good to me. The first whereas looks good to me. I think that there are some hot buttons in this in the subsequent whereases where we talk about having to leave, separating families, forced reduction. I think that this opens up the appearance that we are elevating protection for a certain group of people in our community when we should be advocating for every person in our community and not necessarily elevating protection for anyone. And that was one of the interesting topics that came up when speaking with the attorney that presented to us before. Very intelligent, articulate, and subsequent to that conversation, there is a sense that any resolution that an entity, municipality or whatever comes up with, it's going to either feel like it's protecting or it's saying, no, come on in and have your way with the federal mandates. So I have reservations about some of the whereas that seem to elevate a group of people above others. The whereas Estes Park is a multicultural community, cultural diversity provided by our immigrant community, it's valuable and important. The resolution is good to me, but I would not support this as it was written. I do like people, I like humans, but I want to advocate for the whole community and not any particular class.
Thank you, Trustee Eigel. Other comments? Trustee Lancaster.
Yeah, I support this, but I understand where Trustee Eigel's coming from, and I guess I'd ask, certainly you could ask that certain whereases be struck so that the board is comfortable with it, and obviously it's the Therefore, a statement is the important part of this, and if there are sections of this that you think you're uncomfortable with, you know, I'd like to hear that and maybe an alternative and just to strike those whereas statements.
I would suggest that, and what that would do would be to pull back a little bit of the specifics and really give the general sense that it's important to take care of everyone. And it's important for our country to take a really close look at immigration reform because it's not being well managed right now. And I think as a town government, we can say that with complete confidence. And so my recommendation, not as a formal suggestion yet because we haven't heard from everyone, but I would go with the first whereas and the resolution at the very end of the statement. And if you look at those closely, the language that I highlighted appears in several of the whereas, but not in a couple. But that number 3 whereas really doesn't make a difference. It just tells about Estes Park.
Let's see, I have not heard from 2 trustees and the mayor pro tem, I believe. Do any of you have commentary on this at this point?
The only commentary I'll have is I had the same commentary I had a few weeks ago. And I still think, I think to not, actually, I don't disagree with Trustee Eigel. The problem is knocking all those things out, then I kind of feel like, why have it in the first place? So I get that. I think that saying it's nonpartisan, I could actually maybe agree with that if it wasn't for the timing. And I think that everybody will agree that it's at least polarizing. I think that there's some people that feel like the timing of it polarizes the community. And I didn't like it 2 weeks ago, and I still don't like that for that reason. So although I'm never for abstaining from a vote, I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Thank you. Trustee Youngland or Hazelton? Oh, Trustee Youngland?
Yeah, my stance really hasn't changed since the last time we reviewed it. I agree completely that where there's other ones in there too, but it's not that I'm against any. I've already said my piece last time, so I just won't reiterate. But I will not be voting in favor of this. That's for sure.
Trustee Hazelton?
Sorry, I should have waited for the acknowledgement. It's a hard habit to break. I'm comfortable with it as is. I think if Trustee Eigel, I understand your suggestion, and I'd probably, I don't want to nitpick through it, but I'd say we could leave a couple of other ones in there because they seem more factual to me than positioned, but I'm comfortable approving it as is. But I would like to make sure we have time for public comment because I think there are folks here who'd like to share their thoughts.
I've heard from all trustees and the mayor pro tem at this point. I will open it up for public comment. Does any member of the public, and we have received quite a few to all of the trustees' written comment, and I think we've all read through those. Does any member of the public request to speak on this item? I see a couple, and you'll have up to 3 minutes. Please provide your name and address, make sure your little green light's on, and take it away.
Kent Smith, 661 Binghorn Drive. As a conservative, liberal, libertarian, I see this as a nonpartisan thing, but I agree with Trustee Eigel. Pulling some of the specific type references out feels a little better to me.
Thank you. Do I have another? Yes.
Good evening. I'm Louise Olson of 450 Pioneer Lane. I know that you've studied this, you spent time weighing arguments for and against in your own souls, because this has a lot to do with humanity. But as a resident of this town for 41 years now, I've seen a very gradual growth in the number of immigrants in our community. I love the diversity, and I'm blessed with being an adopted member of a Mexican family. I'm their American grandma. We share meals in each other's homes. We spend holidays together. We love each other very much. Of course, knowing my family has opened doors among other immigrants, all of whom I cherish as friends. I know that we can't do very much if ICE decides to darken our doors. I know that, and you know that, of course. But we can let the people who are being affected by deportation, who are living in real fear right now, know that we're trying to support them. I think I'm trying to understand what you said, Mr. Eigel, is that how you say your name? Elevating a certain segment of the population. I don't understand how we're elevating them. We're just recognizing that they have a problem right now that the rest of us don't have. You know, a human problem, a huge one. So, you know, I don't see that very clearly. I wrote you all a letter that you may or may not have had time to read, but, and so I've crossed out a lot of things. But I'm trying to understand your position in trying to be neutral, because this is such an important human issue. It could be tragic, you know, for a lot of people. I think you don't want to add anything divisive to an already divided climate in our community. And I understand that, and I sympathize with that. But while you're being well-intentioned, if you hold those views, I think you may be misguided. Because as Desmond Tutu, Bishop Desmond Tutu said once, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen to side with the oppressor. And that's a pretty serious statement. Neutrality sends a message. We don't really care about your problem. Neutrality makes people nobodies. So, if you've already decided your position towards neutrality, I'd ask you, would you please reconsider? Because of the human element in all of this. If you know people really well who are among those who are not documented especially, you know that they're afraid. They're very, very much afraid. I've already offered my home as a place where people can come and stay. Maybe that's not legal, but I really don't care. I'm old enough that it doesn't matter. So, I strongly urge you to adopt the resolution, and, because this is two different things, and to pursue all possible avenues to immigration reform. I suggest that when adopted, if you adopt it, you make it well known. It'd be great if you could put it up on the doors of the town hall or something, because we want our people our immigrant people, friends, family, to know that we're with them, we're supporting them, we understand their fear and what could happen. So I guess that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, oh, all right, we've got another comment. Please refrain from either pro or con from the audience. That in our code of decorum, we would like to not have that occur. It can very easily go the other direction, and therefore, please withhold from applause or some other direction. Terry?
How does this work? It's on?
Yeah.
My name is Terry Rizzuti, 1523 Fish Hatchery Road. I'm full-blood Italian. I grew up in Rome, New York, and it was a segregated community at the time. The Italians all lived on 13 blocks by 2 blocks wide. I had my first fist fight in first grade. By second grade, I was fighting every week or two, max. In second grade, kids would beat me up on the school bus by fighting to see who got to sit behind me so they could hit me in the back of the head with books and notebooks. Junior and senior girls would beat me up when I was in second grade. I went home crying. My dad says, "What are you crying about now?" And I said, "What's a WAP?" And he said, "Something you're going to have to learn to live with." And I said, "Does learning to live with it mean learning to get beat up?" And he said, "Yeah, until you learn to beat back." Well, I wound up in the Marine Corps, learning how to beat back. I'd like to leave here tonight feeling like we've moved way past this.
Thank you. Other commentary from the public? We have a couple options here. We can take the resolution as is and take a motion for approval or denial, or we can send it back to our town administrator with advice for modifications and bring it back around again. Those are really our directions.
I have a third route. I'm sensitive to what Trustee Eigel has to say. And to me, the key to this resolution is the actual resolution. And so I would propose that we adopt the resolution with the first whereas clause and the last whereas clause, but not the ones in between, and with the resolution. And I would make a motion to approve the resolution with those modifications.
Do I have a second?
No, but I have a question about that. Trustee Brown, that pulls in all the language from the last resolution and defeats with the suggestions I just made. So that last whereas desires to reaffirm that support means we're so this is not all immigration reform. The immigration reform is contained in the resolution. The last whereas that you suggested refers back to the previous resolution that includes additional language. And in principle, I would not support that.
Did you have an alternate resolution based on your original commentary?
No, I'm going to see where this goes, whether if it's a vote for what is before us or see if it passes or fails and go with that. I would be okay letting the prior resolution stand, but making this commitment tonight in a vote before this community is a statement of our principles as a community today in the current circumstance of what's going on in our world. So that's what I want to vote on, what's going on today.
Trustee Lancaster.
Okay, I'll throw out another option. When we look down at what we're resolving is we are looking for immigration reform. And I think I've heard people talk about this on both sides of the aisle is the current immigration system isn't working. It's going to cause problems for us. without some revisions. And I think that's universally accepted, that it needs to be adjusted and needs to be changed. And when this body, including some people who are here tonight, passed this before, that was the feeling. It wasn't about, now, things have changed, the situation's gotten worse, but in general, the same situation's there. I think there are a few statements in here that might be pushing buttons. So let me throw out a suggestion and to take away what I think are some of the hot buttons that are pushing towards criticism of things that are going on now, but really talking about what we want to do is see reform move forward. So what I would suggest is take a look at the fourth whereas, which is now reads a forced reduction in the immigration and foreign workforce as a result of changes in immigration policies would have negative impacts on the economy of Estes Park. I suggest striking the word forced and striking the prepositional phrase as a result of changes in immigration policies. So it would read, a reduction in immigrant and foreign workforce would have negative impacts on the economy of Estes Park. I think hopefully we can agree on that because we are dependent on a lot of immigrants. In the next whereas statement, again, strike the word forced, I think, which is a hot button word, and we would just have a reduction in the immigrant workforce would negatively impact an integral part of the Estes Park community by possibly separating families in those United States who may be citizens. And then in the next one, the same thing, just strike the word forced and just leave it at any reduction in Estes Park immigration workforce would likely result in parallel reduction. Those are more stating facts. And normally in a resolution, we do state the facts and the situation and then say what action we would like to see happen to address those facts, and I would leave the rest of it the same. So throw that out for discussion or
I think that
consideration.
was fairly clear, and I think the trustees hear what you described. Are you offering an alternate motion with those modifications?
I would offer an alternative motion with those modifications.
I would second.
We have a motion for those modifications in the fourth, fifth, and sixth whereas clauses by Trustee Lancaster. A second of those modifications by Trustee Brown. Is there additional commentary on this motion?
I do want to say I would support it in the way it stands. I'm trying to find a way that maybe tamp it down a little bit. You know, part of being up here is the art of the possible. And I would like to see this pass in some form. And if this would do, I would prefer to do it the other way, but those few words aren't something I'd follow my sword on. Hopefully this will modify it enough to make people comfortable.
Thank you. Trustee Igo.
And while I appreciate the gesture and the articulating that, it's still singling out the immigrant workforce. And I would say that if we're going to talk about this, any reduction in our workforce is going to have an impact. Any reduction in any part of the workforce, it is, I would not support it the way that was going, unless we really trimmed it back or just let the other one stand.
We could proceed on a vote, but hold, or we can still consider a rewrite of this in a future consideration. But we have a motion and a second on the table for those modifications of the removal of the word forced from those three whereas clauses and the other component on that fourth whereas. I think it's very clear, and we've taken notes to it. I'm ready to proceed to a vote. Let's vote on that motion. We have 4 in favor of the modified motion. We have 1 against, and we have 2 abstentions. The motion passes. The modifications, Town Administrator Mahalik would be made before publication of this in the minutes and signatory. Town Attorney Kramer, do you have commentary?
You have it, Mayor. Before you sign it, it'll be changed as described in the motion.
Thanks for the heartfelt discussion, not just by the trustees, but by the community, both in writing and in person. I personally agree with the folks who say this is a issue of humanity. I do agree with Trustee Eigel that I love you all equally, regardless of your status, origin, whatever. I judge people by humanity, not by their politics. And ultimately, we can find humanity everywhere. There are points of illumination everywhere, and it's so important in this time that the network of intelligence and illumination find each other and continue to work together. So thank you, Town Board. It's a difficult issue. It's a difficult time. We'll move forward. Topic is the Spruce Knob and Carriage Hills Water System Improvements and Loan Agreement, and I'm going to be opening a public hearing, so I'll read it all properly here. The next order of business will be the public hearing on action item 2, Spruce Knob and Carriage Hills Water System Improvements and Loan Agreement, Ordinance 225, for a $5 million 20-year 3.25 interest state revolving fund loan agreement with Colorado Water Resource and Power Development and Authority, containing $1.5 million in loan forgiveness for Spruce Knob and Carriage Hills water system improvements. I'll point out that as we get into the public hearing and the discussion, that represents 2 resolutions and an ordinance, and we will vote individually on each of those 3 items after the public hearing is closed, but our discussion will cover all 3 of those components that are listed in the agenda. At this hearing, the Board of Trustees shall consider the information presented during the public hearing from the town staff, public comment, written comments received on the item. Any member of the board may ask questions at any stage of the public hearing, which may be responded to at that time. I declare the public hearing open, and we're ready for the staff report. We have Jackie Wesley to provide that to us.
Good evening, Jackie Wesley, Project Manager in Utilities. I feel like it's been a long time getting here. We've been talking about this project for like a year, so I'm really excited to be up here actually talking about moving forward with the funding. As you mentioned, there are 2 resolutions and 1 ordinance that are part of this, and I'm going to touch on all of them in this presentation. So let's move on. Overall agenda, overview of the project. You guys are really familiar with it because we've talked about it a lot, but maybe everybody in the audience isn't, so we'll go through kind of what the project is, reasons why we're doing it, a little bit of background information and funding information on the SRF and Bill program, and then a funding and financial strategy, and finally a schedule based on where we are today. It's subject to change as papers get signed and things move forward. So overall in the project, 2 pieces to the project, Carriage Hills Phase 1. The map there shows you the Carriage Hills area, big circle toward the bottom. The blue lines are the intended Phase 1 portion of the project. If bids come in really good, we'd really like to add the orange lines too. So we had talked about that in one of the other presentations, with preferences being to do a connection at Gray Fox and a connection continuing on down Whispering Pines. So it's really Carriage Drive, Whispering Pines, and then adding what we can based on bidding. It's about a mile of pipe in Carriage Hills, and that was the former Crystal Water Company, so their pipelines are a little too small and not very deep enough, subject to a lot of breakage. The second piece is up there in Spruce Knob, which is really Joel Estes Drive, and there's 12 homes along there. Little story, it's a compelling story with Spruce Knob. The Spruce Knob Water Company was using a well, and then the state came back to them and told them they had to cease and desist using the well because they could not meet augmentation requirements. In 2022, the board approved us to provide them bulk water service through the end of 2024. So one of the things you're seeing today to approve is extension of that bulk water service agreement until we can connect them to our system. During that time frame, they were supposed to upgrade their system to meet town standards, and then they would tie over to the town and become individual water customers in the town. Lots of reasons why they couldn't quite finish that in time. They were in the process of trying to get some state funding through the State Revolving Fund Loan Program and through the bill, and they found out from EPA that they were not eligible for that funding because they were no longer a public water system. So the state asked the town to help them out by rolling them into our project and let them pay their portion. And by doing that, we became eligible for other funding opportunities for that DOLA grant and for some principal forgiveness. So it's a positive winning story with the Spruce Knob community and how they tie into the town. So why are we doing this? Both systems have a lot of O&M requirements. Their lines are too shallow, they're cast iron pipe, they're subject to breakage, they're subject to leaking. We spend a pretty good chunk of change fixing pipes in the Carriage Hills area every year. I think we had showed a picture, or at least talked about repair clamps beside repair clamps beside repair clamps in Carriage Hills. So, after a while, you're band-aiding Band-Aids, and it's time to actually replace that infrastructure. It's beyond its life, and it was not put in according to standards anyway. We also do a lot to improve fire protection in both areas. We're adding hydrants. Phase 1 and 2 for Carriage Hills would be 35 hydrants. I think you had asked about that before. Phase 1 is 20 by itself. If we add those elements, it'll be about 35 new hydrants. It also interconnects the system. So again, my old analogy, the tree system, we have a tree, we don't want trees, we want loops. So this helps us with some of our loops and gets rid of some of the tree branches. And then the interruption when a pipeline breaks is significant for the people in the area, both traffic and from their water connectivity perspective. So replacing those old subject to breakage pipelines with a new system helps eliminate some of that risk and some of those impacts. I want to go through the SRF and bill program a little bit. Acronyms are big, so I thought I'd start off the slide with saying here are the two acronyms. When I say SRF, it's a state revolving fund, and bill is that bipartisan infrastructure law. The bill piece of the SRF program is relatively new, and that provided some specific funding for elements of projects or for disadvantaged communities. Sounds strange, but Estes Park qualifies under bill as a disadvantaged community, so we got a $1.5 million principal forgiveness under bill. The state revolving fund is actually parented by EPA, and it's administered by each state. And it's intended to be a revolving fund, hence the name, that they lend out money, get money back in, they match, and it continuously, perpetually goes in a circle to help feed infrastructure projects. Consider it like a loan bank for infrastructure projects. There's two in the state, one's for water, drinking water, and one's for wastewater. And we're obviously on the drinking water side, but there's a whole separate program for the wastewater side. So it's a pretty extensive program, and there's lots of agency involvement in the design, construction, and implementation of these projects. These next couple slides are actually from the SRF program, so I don't take credit for coming up with them, they did. But I did add some little notes at the bottom on what the different acronyms are. Again, acronyms are all over the place on all this stuff, right? So Water Quality Control Division, they're really the primary agency that we deal with. They have the technical role, they review the drawings, they make sure we're doing things that we're supposed to do, that we have the correct set-asides, and that we're doing the federal reporting we need to do. The authority is the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority. And they're kind of like the banker. They look at all the financial information. They do all the, again, federal reporting and distribute funds. And then there's a third agency, DOLA. And DOLA is kind of like their partner agency. They help with additional funding, hence our grant is partnered with their SRF program, so they kind of joint together. And they do a lot of outreach for the SRF program. Another cute slide from the SRF program that helps kind of define the general steps. That yellow box is kind of where we are in that overall flow process. So we did the eligibility survey. We do it every year, and we basically say everything we might ever want to borrow money for goes into the eligibility survey. It's no commitment. You just dump everything in there and say, we might want to borrow money. Here's a whole bunch of stuff we might want to borrow it for. Then you do a pre-qualification, lots of paperwork with that one, and we talk about what we might do with the money, and they say, these projects sound better than those projects, or this funding might be available versus that funding. Project needs assessment, we completed that last year, and that's extensive documentation about how we would spend the money. This is the point where they came to us and asked us to help with Spruce Knob. Spruce Knob was trying to get to that project needs assessment level. We were there, and they asked us to help out by combining with them. Then we do the loan application, and now we're at the loan execution phase. The environmental review, last time I talked to you guys, we had completed some portions of the environmental review, and we had the archaeologists go out and do some field work because they were required to look for archaeological sites in the Carriage Hills and Spruce Knobs area. They didn't find any, but we completed that, and we just got yesterday our environmental clearance. So we actually have all the environmental stuff done, so that's why there's a little star in your package, probably doesn't have a star. And then we did submit for design review to CDPHE, and this morning I got approval from them. So I couldn't update this, sorry, but we do have all those checks now on the right columns. And then SRF requirements, again, general requirements. We have to meet, we're under that foremost borrowers, we have to meet everything there. We do not have to meet the for some borrowers pieces because we're financially in a pretty good position. We presented a nice package to them. We have to, comply with all the bond council opinion, which I think, I don't remember if that's in your package or not. Thank you. 3 months O&M reserve and the bond test. And those are pretty typical. And then there's some additional administrative work with an SRF program, especially with the Buy America, Build America, and American Iron and Steel and Davis-Bacon. Those are the key areas that I wanted to highlight for you. Again, it's basically saying that the majority of our products were made in America and we're using them. For us, it's not really difficult on a pipeline project, but this gets more challenging if you're doing a water plant or a wastewater plant, because there's some other elements that are hard to get, electronics and things like that are hard to get made in America. And then Davis-Bacon wage rate says that they will pay the contractor who's selected will pay a certain minimum wage. And that is provided to us by the state, so this is the wage that they have to pay. And then we do surveys to check that they're really paying those wage rates. I got feedback from a couple of the participants in the community that we were using too many acronyms and they didn't know what they were. So I want to clarify that a little bit here. When we say the DOLA grant, we really mean this Energy Mineral Impact Assistance Fund grant is the DOLA grant. So interchangeably we say that, but this is the same grant. So I think that's where that confusion was. We did receive the maximum award, and again, that was largely because the Spruce Knob compelling story when they joined the town's project, it helped us get that $1 million DOLA grant. And then financially, where are we at? There are actually two loans. There's one that's the drinking water fund and one that's the bill loan. They're rolled together for purposes of the discussion, but it's $3.5 million total. And then there's the bill principal forgiveness, and that's applied upfront for $1.5 million. And then that DOLA grant is $1 million, and that's spread over time. So it's not all at once on the DOLA grant. The water fund would also contribute $2.3 million for a total project cost of $8.3. Now that's where in the beginning I was talking about if bids come in really amazing and we get our low bidder is $5 million, we've got more ability to add those other elements to the project. So we want to try to get to that budgeted $8 million total project cost. It's a 20-year loan, and the loan itself is 3.5, and it's 3.25% interest rate. The loan agreement is a really long document, and if you really want to read it, it's very fun. But we are obligated to commit to certain things in that loan agreement. So we have to get that state approval of the drawings before we advertise for bid, and we are got that, like I said, this morning. We have a couple of comments from them they want us to clarify, and then we get the final go ahead and do it. Within 12 months of our loan closing, we have to begin construction. Shouldn't be a problem, but we got to keep the ball rolling on all of these things. We have to do the audits, which we already do because you already have an SRF. We already have one SRF loan, so we already have to do audits for other loans and grants. And then we have these 3 other bond obligations that we have to continue to meet. That first one is for work at Mary's Lake that was issued in 2008, and it actually retires in 2028, so it's almost done. And then the other one is the Park Entrance Estates, and that was pretty recent. That was 2020. Not a big loan, but it was a USDA rural development. And then the co-bank loan for Prospect Mountain at $4.5 million. Rough schedule, depending on approvals, signatures, and closings, and all that kind of stuff. So know if the closing doesn't happen in March, April, then everything slides. But we're looking at the finding a no significant impact, which we just got. So that did make the February completion, and then we hopefully could close in March, April timeframe. Look to award for this summer. We would advertise for bids and then bring the apparent low bidder, qualified low bidder back to you guys for approval. And then start construction in May or June. We did want the contractor to target completing Spruce Knob portion first, because that again is that first segment to the Mall Road Loop. And then complete construction in November 2026. You know, there's feedback that we're getting that says that's plenty of time, but every time they say that, they finish just on time. So I'm going to keep it on November. So we'll keep that schedule. And that's where we're at. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Before we get to trustee comments, does any member of the public wish to comment on the topics? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to the trustees for questions and comments.
Thank you, Jackie. It does feel like we've been talking about this for a long time, and I remember a long time ago when we were talking about how it's going to happen in the construction. So this is good timing to get this hopefully wrapped up. What do you think for me, this is a deal breaker on any project the town wants to do. What is the daily impact going to be? What's the real life impact going to be on the people who live by this project? Is it going to be unbearable? Or I assume you're going to give me an assurance that it'll be fine, it'll be in stages, there's a way to work around it, all of those things. But I'm really going to look for that in every project that this town undertakes, that we have to be cognizant of the impact on the community around these projects. Can you address that?
Sure. An advantage that Carriage Hills has that some of the other areas that we've built in recently don't have is that they have a lot of other ways you can go. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of cul-de-sacs or dead-end roads. Immediately in front of your house, when the contractor's there, yeah, it's going to be a mess. We do have provisions in the contract that they have to reopen the road each night, that they have to restore things upon completion of the project to as close to existing condition as reasonable. We've been working a lot with the county on what can we do to make sure the roads are restored. That seems to be the biggest complaint we get on projects. It's strange, it's not so much the construction disruption, it's the after. Why isn't my street restored better? Why is my plant not back? Why is, this happening or that not happening? So we're really working closely with the county to make sure, because it's county roads mostly. They're managed and run by the POA or whichever acronym it is for that group. But to restore the roads is where we're really going to focus. Now, we've had a number of meeting opportunities with the community out there. The last public meeting we had, 2 people showed up, so I won't say they were well attended, but we have made offers and attended their HOA meeting last year, and we talked a lot about immediate construction impacts, and they will exist. There's a probability that there will be intermittent shutoffs of water because when you make the connections of each service to the main line, there has to be a shutoff of water. And the pipelines are really old out there and they're brittle. So it is also likely that something will happen to the existing system while we're constructing with breakages and stuff like that. So we've been working a lot with our water division guys to say, how can we support the contractor if there is a break during construction in the existing system? There will be, we're calling it pre-excavation rock preparation, AKA blasting, to get the hard rock that's out there, because there's a lot of hard rock. So that will be, people won't hear or see it. It's not this giant explosion like you see on TV. It's a, so but there is rock prep needed, and there will be slow going on some areas of construction because of the heavy hard rock. So you'll see people getting frustrated, wires in the contractor moving faster, probably because they're stuck in a hard rock area. So yeah, there are impacts. We're doing as much as we can to mitigate them. And there is the advantage of alternative routes in most of that area.
Okay, my second question was about the water disruption. You answered that. And I'm really pleased to hear that there's a contractual obligation to restore the use to the community at the end of the evening, and then at the end of the project, get it back. So thank you. That's exactly what I think we need to pay attention to.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Brown.
So I had a wonderful talk this morning with Jackie and others in the water department. They definitely assuaged a lot of my concerns here. I have expressed earlier concern about spending a bunch of money, of town money outside of town. And what I did, but I learned a lot today that really made me kind of change my view on that in this particular project. Insofar as apparently when we acquired the water company way back when, and I think Greg White was involved in that, we got a bunch of water rights out of that. And I tell you, in this state, there's nothing more valuable than water rights. And it's very important for the community as a whole and for any development or growth that might occur in this community to have those water rights. Mainly because we're the only one that supplies water in the entire community. So that was an important part. Also, I think that there is obviously going to be substantial savings associated with maintenance when we put this in, and that'll be long-term, and that'll reduce costs, and I guess we reduce water loss as well. We reduce the risk that we are out of compliance with state requirements. And probably the one that really got me at the end was when Jason Lang said, there was a house in Carriage Hills that caught on fire, and it was more than 1,000 feet away from a fire hydrant, and it got completely demolished. So from a public safety standpoint, if nothing else, this is important for our community, whether they're in the town or not. So the one thing I mentioned in our call that I would like to raise up for future is I'd really like to get an analysis of the payback of projects like this. We had talked earlier as a board about major projects and how we approach them. And I have served on private company boards, and when they get a piece of equipment, a new piece of equipment, they look at the payback for that piece of equipment to make sure it's a good financial decision. And I think we need to do that to a certain extent with projects like this as well, although there are things that just don't fit within that, like the fire protection issue, for instance, and the fact that you may now have an asset that stays in service 100 years rather than 50 or 20 or whatever the current pipes are. So there's a lot that goes into this, and I'm very impressed with the analysis and how the town has dealt with this. And in spite of the fact this is a lot of money and a big commitment for the town, it is our asset. We need to maintain our asset and improve our asset and improve the infrastructure for the community, which doesn't necessarily end at town borders. So particularly when you have a water system that goes all through the valley. So I very much support this and appreciate all the work that the water department has done on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Youngland.
Just a quick question, and it's kind of getting in the weeds, but so for Spruce Knob, people, obviously they're not going to have the brunt of the loan to repay. It will be segmented out for whatever their portion is. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I figured so, but I wanted to ask just in case. As far as Carriage Hills goes, then is that going to be divvied amongst all those users as well, or will that just be incorporated with everybody else?
That's incorporated with everybody else because they're already customers.
Okay.
The Spruce Knob guys are bulk, and they were supposed to make that conversion and then pay for their own system. They are paying for an 8-inch diameter pipe. We're paying to upsize that pipe to a 12, so it becomes part of that Mall Road loop.
Right.
And they will then become individual water system customers versus a bulk customer. That was a temporary fix in 2022, I think, to get them through to where they could upgrade to connect to us as individual customers.
And as I read, they'll have to pay tap fees and things
Yeah.
like that on
Correct.
top of repaying back the loan
Correct.
of their segment part.
Yeah,
Okay.
we kind of worked through it with them to explain it to them this way, so it's a pretty easy way to understand. If there were 100 customers total, including them, and they're 12, they get 12% of each of the grant and principal forgiveness. So it's based on how many total are connecting in the project, their percentage of that is
Oh,
what they're
okay.
allocated. All 12 of them are agreeing to sign up and part of the project. And right now, our house count in Carriage Hills is 78 technically, but you never know exactly where the connections are. So as we start constructing, we find one or lose one. So that's why we're saying it's probably 78 or 80. We'll know the final count at the end.
Okay. And how do you expect the construction out at Spruce Knob to affect Mall Road traffic and
That is the joy of it being on Joel Estes,
Okay.
because we won't really affect Mall Road at all.
won't.
There will be a little bit at the beginning when we make the connection on Mall Road, but it's all off of Mall Road. A little bit of construction traffic as they go in and out of Joel Estes, but it's not continuing down Mall Road, which is nice.
although they don't have another way out.
They don't, so there's gonna be, just like we're doing on Prospect Mountain, a lot of stop, wait 30 minutes, let us put plates on, you gotta drive across. That's why there's an advantage to Carriage, they can go another way, but in the case of Spruce Knob, Joel Estes, there will be delays for them getting in and out. Always emergency vehicles can be cleared to get through, but just everyday people going in and out. What we did on Prospect Mountain is we said to folks, we're working from 11 to 2, we can't stop, go in before or come back after. So we'll have windows like that say we can't stop. And then outside of those windows, the contractor can generally stop what he's doing and make a way for people to get around.
Okay,
But we need some
good.
time for them to work uninterrupted.
Right. So that's ahead of time, and so
Yeah.
they can kind of plan. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Town Attorney Kramer.
Thank you, Mayor. And Trustee Youngland, to one of your earlier questions, just to follow up. As we did with the park entrance system, and we're still planning to do with the Prospect Mountain system, we will ultimately be coming back to you all to update the rate schedule to reflect that there will be that additional monthly fee as well for those properties at Spruce Knob. So that's going to be built into our rate schedule ordinance, just as something additional to make sure it's clear to everyone on top of the contract that we're entering into, that is an expectation moving forward.
Trustee Agel.
Jackie, can you scroll back to the time frame slide? We don't have it in our packet.
Town Clerk's Office, have there been any other communications which are not in the board packet?
Mayor, the clerk's office has not received any comments on this item.
All right. Any further questions from the trustees? All reports, statements, exhibits, and written communications presented will be accepted as part of the record of this public hearing. The public hearing is closed. We will consider each resolution and the ordinance separately and vote on them separately. So I'll look for a motion on Resolution 1625, the First Amendment to the Spruce Knob Bulk Water Service Agreement, extending the term to December 31st, 2025.
I move for the approval of Resolution 16-25, extending the term of the bulk water service agreement.
Second.
Trustee Hazelton motioned for Resolution 1625 to be approved. Trustee Youngland seconded. Is there any other comment on that? If not, we'll go to a vote. Thank you. Resolution 1625 is in the books. We'll consider Resolution 1725, voluntary water service agreement with Spruce Knob property owners. And I'll need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 17-25, approving the voluntary water service agreement.
I'd second the motion.
Trustee Youngland had the motion, Trustee Eigel the second. Any other comments? Let's vote. That passes. Resolution 1725. We're now on to Ordinance 225, the 5 million 20-year, 3 1/4 interest state revolving fund loan agreement. I won't read the entire thing. You can read it if you want to, if someone makes a motion, or refer to it as Ordinance 225.
Mayor, I'd move for the approval of ordinance 0225.
Second.
Trustee Eigel made the motion for approval of 225. Trustee Hazelton the second. Any other comments? Let's vote. Jackie, you're 3 for 3. You
Thank
win.
you very much, Board.
Okay, thanks for the good work. Long time coming. Can't wait till November 2026. All right, we will move on to the final item on the agenda, the interview committee for the Estes Park Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. I think we have from the town clerk's office, Bunny Beers will walk us through it.
Thank you, Mayor. This one's fairly simple. The town board does need to appoint to the interview committee to serve for the Estes Park Housing Authority Board of Commissioners interviews. This particular vacancy is unique because due to state statute changes, this current position must be filled by an individual currently receiving benefits from the Housing Authority, and that's recent, that's a new change. As of today, we only have one application that we've received. As the board knows, the liaison to this committee is Trustee Brown. And so we're looking for this board to identify another member, if Trustee Brown would like to sit on that, which is common, to serve for these interviews.
Trustee Brown, you're okay with
Of course, yes.
being one of the two? Do we have a second individual who would like to participate?
I'm not volunteering, but I just noticed in reviewing our policy governance, it's actually we have stated that the role of the liaison is to interview. So we have it stated that one of the jobs is to review applications and interview candidates for the board their liaisons to.
Chain him down.
So that
he's
one's
in.
one's
Okay.
done.
Since he's Mr. Policy tonight, let's.
Frank, you weren't volunteering, but I'm going to nominate you.
Oh, I'll second that.
So I would move to appoint Trustee Brown and Trustee Lancaster to the EPHA interview committee.
I'll second.
That's what you get for saying that, Frank.
I didn't know we had any railroads here in Estes.
We do now. Well, let's go ahead and vote. Thank you for volunteering, Trustee Lancaster. That's incorrect in the minutes. Let me state it properly that by a vote of 6-1, that Trustee Brown and Trustee Lancaster have been approved to participate on the interview committee. That is all the business that we have. I see no light.